Week 17 of the fantasy football season with the championship here for most fantasy owners. Here's wide receiver starts at every matchup this week. Dallas Cowboys at the Commanders. First of 3 Christmas games. CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens starts. These guys are having great seasons for the Dallas Cowboys, even though they're not a playoff team. This week, it's a great matchup at the Commanders, a defense that can't stop anyone. And Dak Prescott all season long has been locked in with Lamb and Pickens, even though Pickens, the last few weeks before last, he had a couple down ball games. He bounced back with a big ball game last week, going over 130 yards and finding the end zone. Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel starts. His Cowboys secondary is still one of the worst secondaries in the league, where we saw the Chargers go up and down the field versus them in last week's game. Quentin Johnston, Ladd McConkey both found the end zone. And this week, I actually like McLaurin and Deebo if it's either Mariota back in the lineup or even with Josh Johnson in there. Like I said, this Cowboy defense, they just can't stop anyone, especially last week where Quinnen Williams was out. Detroit Lions at the Minnesota Vikings. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, they're locked in as starts. I know St. Brown, he missed the practice on Monday to start the week, but I don't think he's in danger of missing the game. We saw a few weeks ago he had the ankle sprain on Thanksgiving. They returned the next week on Thursday versus the Dallas Cowboys. So St. Brown's a gamer. He don't miss games. Even though the Lions are out of it, I still expect him to go out there and play. And Jameson Williams, ever since Dan Campbell's been the play caller, he's going out there putting points on the board and making plays. He's a start. Isaac Tesla, the last few weeks, he's definitely stepping up and making plays for this Lion team. But in the championship game, he's not really a wide receiver I could trust this week. But next season, definitely someone to keep an eye on as a sleeper option going into your fantasy draft. So he's a sit. Justin Jefferson, a start last week. His best game in weeks for Justin Jefferson, where he had 14.5 fantasy points in that ball game. But now it's not looking good that J.J. McCarthy's going to play, where he left the game with a wrist injury last week. So we'll see if he's in or not. And if it's Max Crosby at quarterback, obviously this whole offense is going to take a hit, where we saw going back a few weeks ago in Seattle, he was a turnover machine and they didn't put any points on the board. But Jefferson a start and Jordan Addison a fringe option. He's been a hit-or-miss wide receiver this season. It's Jordan Addison. Last year was a good year for him. But just coming out of the gate regardless this season. He was suspended the first 3 games of the year, and obviously that didn't help him, so he's a fringe option. Denver Broncos at the Chiefs to close out the Christmas ball games. Courtland Sutton to start. The last 3-4 weeks, he's definitely get back to form, is Courtland Sutton, and easily the number 1 option in this passing game. Him and Bo Nix, going back to last season and Nix' rookie year, have been on the same page. And this week, in a matchup with a Chief team that, after getting blown out by Tennessee, pretty much just Chief team now, they phoned it in the last couple weeks, especially with Mahomes out for the season and not making the playoffs. And Troy Franklin, he's been a good option this season for the most part. He's come on over the last few weeks. I know at times this offense is inconsistent, but Troy Franklin's going out there and making plays. And this week at the Chiefs, he's a start. Rashee Rice, we'll see if he's back in this ball game, even though now they're down Gardner Minshew as well out for the season with a knee injury, and down to third-string quarterback Chris Agwunkwan is his Kansas City Chief team. But Rashee Rice, even with a bad quarterback, even in a tougher matchup, I still think he could go out there and be a starting option. And Xavier Worthy is it. He was a bust all season long with Xavier Worthy. A lot of people took him 4th, 5th round, and obviously he just couldn't get anything going. And just another wide receiver they took pretty early in the NFL draft was his Chief team, and it hasn't worked out, so he's a sit. Houston Texans at the Los Angeles Chargers. Nico Collins, he's a start each and every week. I know last week was a quiet week for Nico Collins, but he's a stud wide receiver, and sometimes even these great wide receivers are going to have bad games. So this week, in a matchup where they know they got to put points on the board, even though this Texan defense is one of the best in the league, the Chargers are going to put points on the board. We saw it last week as well. The Chargers, they got a great offense, and they'll put points on the board. So Collins, I think he bounces back. He's a start. Jaden Higgins, Christian Kirk's a sit. Higgins, he showed some flashes in his rookie season this year at times, but in a championship game in the last couple of weeks, his numbers fallen off since Stroud's been back in the lineup. He's a sit. And Christian Kirk, pretty much he was a veteran guy they traded for in the offseason, and he's been on and off the field this year, banged up as usual, and he really hasn't fit in this offense. He's a sit. Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston, this starts for me. Both these guys found the end zone last week, even though it was at a weak Dallas Cowboy defense. And Quentin Johnson, it's one big game and one bad game, it seems like. We've seen games this year where he's had 20 fantasy points and the next week 0 fantasy points. But this week, I think they need him to be more consistent. Both these teams are playoff teams, obviously, with the Texans and the Los Angeles Chargers. I would start both these receivers, Keenan Allen, a sit. He's taken a backseat the second half of the year is Keenan Allen. And he's a veteran at this point of his career where he's the third wide receiver, and on key downs, he'll come in at times, make a couple plays. But in terms of fantasy football, he had some value the first month of the year. And ever since that, his roles tailed off. Baltimore Ravens at the Green Bay Packers. Zay Flowers a start. Last week, it was a big game for Zay Flowers, even though he had a costly fumble late in that one. And that's been an issue with Flowers in the first few seasons of his NFL career, fumbling the football at the wrong times. But this week at the Packers, he's the number one option in this passing game. He's an easy start. Rashad Bateman, DeAndre Hopkins, really haven't seen much from these two wide receivers all season long. This sits for me in this game with a tough matchup, and possibly Lamar Jackson out in this game with the back injury. Even if Lamar's in there, there sits Christian Watson to start. He's the number one option in this passing game for this Packer team. Last week it was surprising he played in that one versus the Chicago Bears, but I think Christian Watson's not 100% obviously with the chest and shoulder injury where Surtain landed on him a couple weeks ago on a deep ball. But this week versus the Ravens, a leaky secondary where we saw the Patriots come back and win that game. He's a start. Jaden Reed, a fringe option, still getting his legs under him. He's been back a few weeks now. Is Jaden Reed in the lineup? And Reed last year, he was the number one wide receiver on this Green Bay Packer team, lining him up all over the formation. And this week, in a matchup versus the Ravens, I still don't have a lot of confidence in him. He's a fringe option, and Romeo Doubs is sit if he plays in this game. So Romeo Doubs fumbling that onside kick and hurting his wrist late in that ball game last week, and then the Bears driving down, forcing it to overtime, and then winning in overtime. So a lot of moving factors here with Doubs, and at this point, I don't think he's been a fantasy option ever since Walton has been back in the line. Arizona Cardinals at the Cincinnati Bengals. Marvin Harrison last week, he did play, but very limited on snaps. We saw he drop a jump ball in the back of the end zone, which was a 50-50 ball. But this week, I think he'll be back in the lineup more if he plays in this game as Marvin Harrison. I know this Cardinal team going nowhere. Obviously, they're losing ball games to get a good pick and get a future quarterback, even though Jacoby Brissett has been solid this season for them. But like I said, Harrison this week, I think if they're going to trot him out there, he's going to get more into the playbook and more snaps. I would start him. And Michael Wilson, him and Brissett, they've been on the same page all season long, especially in the games Marvin's missed. And last week, what a jump ball in the end zone where he took it out of midair between him and the defender, Michael Wilson, and he scored a touchdown on it. So this week in a great matchup at the Bengals, he's a start. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, not much to say. These two guys are locked in weekly to your lineups. And this week in a good matchup versus a bad Cardinal defense, I think we could see similar numbers like they did last week versus the Dolphins for both these receivers. Pittsburgh Steelers at the Cleveland Browns, Adam Thielen, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and Calvin Austin if he plays in this game, where he was banged up with a hamstring injury in last week's game versus the Lions. DK Metcalf, he suspended 2 games for hitting a fan last week's ball game at Detroit, and he's going to try to appeal it, but even if he does, I don't think he's going to win the appeal. Is DK Metcalf, and pretty much these guys are new to the team. Obviously, Thielen and MVS. He was a Steeler a couple weeks ago, and MVS about a month ago signed with the Steeler team. So these guys still getting into the playbook. I know Aaron Rodgers, he likes his veterans around him. We've seen it with the Packers. We saw it with the Jets the last couple years, and now we've seen it here with the Steeler team. But like I said, these guys, they're not acclimated to the playbook much. Their better years are behind them. And this week, in a championship game, I can't trust any of them. This hits Jerry Jeudy, Isaiah Bond. This hits this offense besides Harold Fannin and Junkins at times before. Obviously, he went down with a devastating leg injury last week. Hasn't done anything. So Jeudy and Bond, easy sits. New Orleans Saints at the Tennessee Titans. Chris Olave, it's been a great season for him. And coming into the year, the main thing was if he's going to stay healthy, is Chris Olave, and actually he has all season long, so he's putting up wide receiver number 1 numbers at times as Chris Olave. And this week in a good matchup at Tennessee, and him and the rookie Tyler Shuck have great rapport. He's an easy start. Jameer DK, Elike Elmaner, this is one of the worst offenses in the league of the Tennessee Titans, even though over the last 3 weeks the offense has definitely played better for this Tennessee Titan team, and it's a decent matchup with the Saints coming in, but still these guys are too inconsistent, and their wide receivers I really can't trust. This week, Jacksonville Jaguars at the Indianapolis Colts. Jacoby Myers a couple weeks ago signed a contract extension with this Jacksonville Jaguar team, and he's fit right in since they traded for him at the NFL trade deadline. So Myers and Trevor Lawrence are locked in. This offense is putting up big numbers right now with Myers in there at wide receiver. And this week, in a good matchup at the Indianapolis Colts, after we just saw Purdy and the Niners go up and down the field. Myers a start. Brian Thomas Jr., Parker Washington, fringe options in this game. Brian Thomas Jr., it's been a bad season for him. He's been one of the worst picks in fantasy football this season, where he was a late round, early second round pick in fantasy drafts. And now, like I said, Jacoby Myers, he's the number one option in this passing game for Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars. So this week, Brian Thomas, ceiling not high. He's a fringe option in a decent matchup. And Parker Washington, a fringe option. Last week, he had a breakout game. Obviously, it was Parker Washington, over 100 yards. He found the end zone in that one. Pretty much the only two guys consistent in this offense for the most part this season for Jacksonville is obviously Travis Etienne and Brenton Strange at the tight end position. So this week at the Indianapolis Colts, Thomas and Parker Washington fringe option. Out of the Colts, Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce starts. Pittman, he had a decent ball game in the bad loss versus San Francisco 49ers. And Alec Pierce found the end zone twice in that ball game. So Indianapolis, they're obviously eliminated from playoff contention. But I thought Phillip Rivers got the football down the field. He was making the right calls, making the right adjustments. Spence couldn't stop the Niners in that game, but still, these two wide receivers, they're decent options this week. I know Jacksonville's been playing better defensively, but Pittman and Pierce in a game, they're going to be chasing points to starts. And Josh Downs a fringe option. I know Rivers and Downs have had decent rapport so far in the first couple weeks since Rivers been the quarterback for this Indianapolis Colts team. But Josh Downs, I just don't think the upside is better than Pittman and Pierce, and someone is going to have a down game out of these three receivers. So Downs, a fringe option this week for me. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Miami Dolphins, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. This starts for me in this game. I know Mike Evans, he didn't do much in that one, and a fade touchdown in the back of the end zone pretty much was the majority of his day, but Mike Evans still getting his legs under him. Obviously, he just came back a couple weeks ago from a bad collarbone break, but he's still a big-time wide receiver that could go out there and make plays. And this week in a good matchup at the Dolphins, he's a start. Chris Godwin a start. Chris Godwin, another wideout as well, getting his legs under him. Had a bad leg injury last season. It's taken him all this season pretty much to get back to form where he's missed a decent amount of games. But this week, I would trust him in this one at Miami. And Emeka Egbuka, he's a fringe option. He's definitely taken a back seat over the last 3-4 weeks. He is Emeka Egbuka with these guys back in the lineup, and also with Bucky Irvin back in the lineup and maybe hitting the rookie wall, or defenses are making adjustments to Egbuka as well. So this week, even in a good matchup, to me, at best, he's a fringe option. Jalen Waddle will start, number one option in this passing game for this Miami Dolphin team, even though Quinn Ewers is now the starting quarterback. And obviously, Tua and Waddle had the good rapport playing together for a few seasons, but Waddle's still number one option in this passing game. And this is a pretty decent matchup with the Bucs, so he's a start. Malik Washington is sit. I know I found the end zone in last week's game is Washington, but he's nothing more than a gadget guy and a wide receiver at times that's going to go out there and make some plays. But like I said, in a championship game, I'm not going to trust him. New England Patriots at the New York Jets. Stephon Diggs finally had a big game where he's been pretty much quiet the last month of Stephon Diggs, but it just seems like on those primetime games, he goes out there and puts up numbers, and that's exactly what Diggs did in last week's ball game at the Baltimore Ravens. So this week in a great matchup at a bad Jet defense, he's a start. Kayshon Boutte, Demario Douglas assists. Boutte last week going up for a pass, came down hard on the turf, hit his head. We'll see if he plays in this game, even though it's not looking promising. But pretty much the guys in this offense I would only trust for this Patriot team is Diggs, Hunter Henry, and obviously Henderson and Stevenson and May for this offense. But Boutte, Demario Douglas, Matt Collins, all these guys, even in a good matchup at the New York Jets assists. Adonai Mitchell, John Mechie assists. Drop problems have been an issue for these wide receivers for this New York Jet team. And obviously they've only been with a team over a month now, where they got acquired at the trade deadline from the Colts was Adonai Mitchell and John Mechie from the Philadelphia Eagles. So this week versus a good Patriot defense, and with the rookie Brady Cook starting their sits, Seattle Seahawks at the Carolina Panthers, JSN automatic start each and every week. It seems like every week at least he's finding the end zone or getting over 100 yards in a game. So this week in a mediocre Panther defense, he's an easy start. Cooper Kupp, Rashid Shaheed, that sits for me in this game. I know these guys have been playing a little bit better of late for this Seattle Seahawks team, and a big factor last week they were in the from behind victory versus the Los Angeles Rams. But this week, both these wide receivers are sits. Tator McMillan to start. Last week it was a nice game for Tator McMillan, and he's a big play wide receiver, and he was the first receiver drafted for a reason in the past NFL draft. So this week, in a matchup where most likely I think they'll be chasing points versus Seattle Seahawks defense. He's a start. Jalen Coker, Xavier Legette. This sits for me in this ball game. They really haven't done much all season long in these two wideouts. And pretty much this offense, Rico Dowdle and Ted McMillan, the only two guys you really could trust. New York Giants at the Vegas Raiders, Wan'Dale Robinson to start. Last week it was protecting Jackson Dart, and he only had 13 pass attempts, and he went the first 20 plays of the game only throwing the football a couple times in that one. So obviously that's not a good thing for fantasy owners. And this Giant team playing with kid gloves now with Jackson Dart, where he's not looking to run or anything. But this week in a good matchup at the Raiders, I still would start Wan'Dale Robinson. Darius Slayton has sit. Hasn't done much this season as Slayton. He's been on and off the field. And this Giant team in the offseason, obviously they're going to get Malik Neighbors back to start next season, get Cam Scatterbo back, maybe draft a receiver or sign someone in free agency. And Slayton, it wouldn't be surprising to me if he's off the team. Trey Tucker, Jack Beck, that's it. This offense pretty much, Ashton Ginty, Brock Bowers, the only two guys you could trust week in and week out. And Tucker's had a couple moments this season where he did have a 3-touchdown game early in the year at the Commanders, but besides that, he's been a fringe to sit receiver. And Jack Beck starting to get into the offense a little bit more over the last couple weeks, but he's a wideout I wouldn't trust as well, even in a decent matchup as sit. Philadelphia Eagles at the Bills, a big matchup. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, their starts each and every week. The last few weeks, this wide receiving core has definitely got things going. And Jalen Hurts, he's quieted the critics. And also A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith now haven't come out to the media saying anything, that they need the football and they got to go out there and make plays. So this week in Buffalo, this could be a high-scoring game. And these two receivers starts, Khalil Shakir, pretty much the only consistent wide receiver on this roster. And the Bills, they just can't get that other guy to come in. They tried trading for Waddle. Obviously couldn't do it. They brought in Brandon Cooks, brought back Gabe Davis. These guys couldn't do much. So Shakir, the only receiver that's relevant, I think, for this Bill team, and he's a start in this one. Chicago Bears at the 49ers, Rome Odunze, he's been out a couple games now with the foot injury. We don't know if he's going to return sooner than later. So if he does play, he's a start as Rome Odunze. He's still the best receiver in this receiving room for the Chicago Bear team. He can run the routes. Him and Caleb Williams have had good reports. If he's back in the lineup, he's a start. DJ Moore, a start as well. The last 2 out of 3 weeks, he's had big games, including a walk-off touchdown in overtime last week to beat the Green Bay Packers in pretty much a game you didn't think they would come back and win, with the odds were slim to none in that ball game. So DJ Moore starting to get things going finally, him and Caleb Williams. And this week at San Francisco, where they're most likely going to have to chase points in this one a little bit, he's a start. And Luther Burden, if he returns to the lineup, he's a fringe option. With Burden, they were starting to use him in different formations and different roles and jet sweeps and stuff a little bit. It was his spare offense before he went out with the injury. And also as well with Luther Burden, he was getting the most targets the last couple of weeks. So with all those factors, if he's back in the lineup, he's a fringe option now to the Niners. Jawan Jennings, he's having a great season for this 49er team. And the thing is, he's not even 100% playing with multiple injuries throughout the season. But Brock Purdy's locked in. He's making big plays, stretching it down the field. And now if George Kittle misses some time, Jennings, his value will go up a little bit. So this week in the matchup versus the Bears, he's a start. And Ricky Pearsall, he's been out a majority of the season with the knee injury. Last week he missed the ball game as well, was Ricky Pearsall. But we know he's a big-time play wide receiver when he has an opportunity to go out there on the field. Well, obviously with the off-the-field incident last season, getting shot, playing pretty much a half a year, and this year with the knee injury, it's been a struggle for him to get on the field and healthy, obviously, for Ricky Pearsall. But if he is back this week, it's a good matchup versus the Bears. And he's someone I would start in the final game of the week. Los Angeles Rams at the Atlanta Falcons. Puka Nacua won a monster game last week, 225 yards, 2 touchdowns in that one. He's arguably the best receiver in fantasy football, and this week he's an easy start. And Davante Adams, it's not looking likely he's going to play in this ball game for this Los Angeles Ram team, but obviously if he does, he's amongst the league leaders in touchdowns at the wide receiver position. So if somehow he's pretty healed up on Monday night from that hamstring, I would give it a go with Adams. And now to the Falcons, Drake London, he had a down ball game last week where he had to get his legs under him. His snaps were limited a little bit, but it was the Bijan Robinson show in that ball game in Arizona. But this week, after coming out unscathed in last week's game, I think London could go out there, get back in on track. He's a start. And Darnell Mooney, he's been non-existent this season for fantasy owners in this Falcon team, and he's a sit. So that's wide receiver start sit every matchup for Week 17 of the fantasy football season.